Learn from the pros. Silv1rob1/shutterstock.com. We interviewed 4 couples in which both partners are relationship experts about their best marriage advice. Common themes emerged, including, stay curious about your partner, and know the whole is greater than the sum of its parts. Ultimately, marriage is hard for everyone, but there are some time-tested tricks to make it easier. There's a curious trend among relationship experts, many of them are married to each other. When I first realized this, it sounded to me like the makings of either heaven or hell. Case for heaven: no one ever name-calls, or violates their partner's trust, or shuts down emotionally because you both know those are counterproductive behaviors. Case for hell: you can't storm off like a child during an argument about chores because you just counseled a client not to do that this morning. Curious to know which way the pendulum swings, I called up 4 married couples in which both partners are relationship experts and asked whether and how they practice what they preach. In the 4 conversations, I heard some common themes about the conflicts that have played out in their marriages and how they've used their knowledge of successful relationships to resolve them. Read on to find out how the pros do marriage, and what can you learn from them. View as 1-page slides. Joshua Ganderson, Flickr. Suzanne Pileggi-Pavelski and James Pavelski, Ph.D. co-wrote the forthcoming book Happy Together, in which they apply insights from positive psychology to romantic relationships. Pileggi-Pavelski's background is in journalism. Pavelski is a philosopher. Both had been successful in their individual careers, but their approaches to research and writing were starkly different. Pavelski talked about the importance of interdependence, which he acknowledged could be a challenge. At one point, Pileggi-Pavelski showed her husband a draft of a chapter she'd written. Pavelski thought they could do better. Seeing how much energy she'd put into the drafts, Pavelski told me, I had a choice of saying, okay, these drafts are good, we can just kind of tweak them a little bit and then we're good to go. Or, I could say to her, honestly, I think we need to take them apart and put them back together again, and I think they'll be better. Ultimately, Pavelski gave his wife some time to think it through more, and she realized the draft could in fact use some revision. Interdependence, Pavelski said, is about standing up for your perspective and also being willing to yield a little to the other person's perspective. Flickr. Funk Doobie. Peter Pearson, Ph.D. and Ellen Barder, Ph.D. run the Couples Institute in Menlo Park, California. Pearson told me one of their biggest points of friction is that he has a higher tolerance for visual disarray when it comes to clutter, much higher than Ellen. Most of the time, Pearson said, he's more conscious of the amount of clutter around and does something about it. There's a bigger picture of what we want to create in our relationship, he said, and having a clutter-free environment helps us both. So it's the why. Why would I be interested in putting forth the effort of less clutter? Why would Ellen be interested in relaxing her standards? So why varies from couple to couple, Pearson said. It's about what you want to create more of as a twosome, whether that's peace, happiness, or personal fulfillment. Pedro Ribeiro Simões, Flickr. Every couple I interviewed mentioned something about staying curious during conflict and in general. Carrie Cole, Med. LPC, and Don Cole, DMIN, LPCS, LMFTS, who are the research director and clinical director, respectively, at the Gottman Institute, shared something similar. Recently, Carrie was visibly upset with Don because she'd asked him a question and had blown her off. Instead of getting defensive, Carrie said, Don got curious. He asked questions like, why did that bother you so badly, and was willing to listen to the answer. Carrie told me it's about feeling validated. For somebody to say, tell me more about that and where does that come from for you, what's your history around that really soothes me. Julie Schwartz Gottman, Ph.D., president and co-founder at the Gottman Institute, said her husband, John Gottman, Ph.D., co-founder at the Gottman Institute, adopted a relationship-strengthening strategy directly from their own research. If I was really upset about something or making a complaint about a behavior of his, she said, rather than going defensive, he would say, what do you need, honey? What do you need? And immediately all the tension would melt away. The anger would melt away. It was a balm to my soul. Why? Because John recognized that when I was upset about something, first of all my feelings were valid, she said. He loved me and my feelings mattered, plus he showed a willingness to help ease her distress. Chris Andros, Getty Images. Pileggi-Pavelski and Pavelski call themselves Aristotelian lovers, based on Aristotle's philosophy that two people in any kind of relationship should support each other's growth and development. To that end, they try to understand the unique character strengths that each one brings to the table. They recommend the character strengths test that's a cornerstone of the positive psychology movement, available here. Pilegi Pavelski gave an example. She and her husband are both highly creative, but she has zest and James is more inclined toward analytical thinking. Before having really known about positive psychology, maybe I would have thought, oh, my husband's deliberately trying to annoy me and be a persnickety philosopher. Now she understands that analytical thinking has helped make him successful in his field. When I see it as an asset and I realize it's a part of who he is and this is how we're furthering a project, then it's a positive thing to our relationship. Electric Eye Flickr Carrie Cole said she and Don often generate a unique and blended idea in their conversations. We kind of play off of each other, she told me. For example, before the Coles joined the Gottman Institute, Don suggested they get an apartment in Seattle and get licensed to practice therapy in Washington. They're based in Houston, Texas. Carrie looked into the licensing process and got the ball rolling, she said. Don noted that Carrie is more detail-oriented than he is. Carrie said, "He's the big dreamer, I make it a reality." Pilegi Pavelski and Pavelski have a similar dynamic. Pavelski said there were times during their writing process when Susie will have an idea and he'll say, "Let's go with it. That's brilliant." Or I will have a perspective and Susie will say, I wouldn't necessarily come up with that myself, but I like the way you're thinking about that. And that's great. He described it as knowing that the whole is greater than the sum of its parts. Flickr Detron. The Coles emphasized the importance of daily or weekly rituals for maintaining closeness and intimacy. For example, every morning Carrie gets up earlier and makes Don coffee while he's still sleeping. Then, while he's getting ready for work, he makes her a cup of tea just the way I like it. And even though they work together, they still make time to debrief, something they recommend in the Gottman Couples Workshops. It involves listening to your partner talk about anything stressful or interesting that happened to them that day. What they don't do on a regular basis spend a lot of time talking about the relationship itself. Instead, they take the temperature of their relationship all the time. Carrie said, "We feel positively about each other and we feel positively about the relationship and we feel supported. And when we don't, it is such an abrupt kind of difference that it feels so uncomfortable that we work to fix it."